A warm greeting to everyone. Welcome back to this self-knowledge course. This is lesson number 30 of our journey together. The purpose of this course is to provide us with a clear guide so that we can awaken 100% of our consciousness. That is why, in today's lecture, we will explore a very important topic, the method to awaken consciousness. In this lecture, we are going to understand why our consciousness is currently asleep. Only by discovering the real causes of this state can we truly comprehend what actions are necessary to change it. From there, we will also be able to deduce which methods can genuinely lead us to an awakening. Nowadays, there are countless approaches, methods, practices, rituals, substances, and even drugs that claim to awaken our consciousness. But in reality, most of them only take us further away from true awakening, plunging us deeper into the dreamlike state in which humanity already lives. So the objectives of this lecture are, first, to clearly understand how our consciousness is divided, what we call objective consciousness and what we call subjective consciousness. Second, we are going to analyze in detail how we can awaken our objective consciousness and how we can liberate and awaken our subjective consciousness as well. Before going deeper, the first thing we need to clarify is this. What exactly do we mean by objective and subjective? We can say that objective refers to that which seeks to fulfill the true purpose for which it was conceived. Every one of us came into this existence with a purpose. The objective part of our consciousness is the one that naturally strives to accomplish that purpose. At the same time, it recognizes that every being in this world has come for the same reason, to truly know themselves. And because of that, it seeks not only to fulfill its own mission, but also to help others reach theirs. This objective aspect within us always takes into account the greater good. It considers everyone's point of view and does not base itself on illusions or mere beliefs. Instead, it searches for what is real, seeking direct experience rather than opinions, and avoids becoming identified with the subjective distractions of this world. On the other hand, subjective refers to everything that lacks a conscious purpose. The subjective part pursues superficial and selfish objectives, always placing its personal interests above everything else. The subjective within us only considers its own limited point of view, its beliefs, concepts, and desires. It manifests whenever we identify with one of our many I's, or psychological defects, when we feel, think, or want something through anger, pride, envy, lust, or any other egoic impulse. And inevitably, it leads us to chase inconsequential and temporary goals, such as wealth, fame, prestige, or power, none of which bring us closer to our true purpose. From this, we can understand that within us there are two types of consciousness. We all come from the sacred absolute Sun, carrying 3% of awakened self-conscious essence, while the remaining 97% is what we call innocent essence. This 97% of essence has become trapped within the ego as part of a necessary learning process. In every egoic expression, whether it is lust, anger, laziness, pride, envy, or any other defect, there is a portion of our consciousness trapped within it. Each of these expressions holds a percentage of our essence that we must gradually recover. It is through the work of that 3% of awakened essence that we gain the strength and clarity needed to liberate the other 97%. This 3% represents our spirit, the divine spark within each of us. It is self-conscious, it is objective, it is wisdom, it is light, and because of its nature, it cannot be conditioned or corrupted by the ego. The remaining 97% forms our soul, our inner energy, which, although currently trapped, carries within it the potential to awaken fully. When we speak about subjective consciousness, we are referring to the 97% of our essence that is currently trapped within the ego and processed under its conditioning. This means that as long as that essence, which is by nature fire and light, inner drive and wisdom, remains conditioned by a psychological defect, that defect will control our strength, our willpower, and our intelligence. As we learned back in Lesson 11, the soul is composed of various faculties, powers, and virtues. But since the soul is now trapped within the ego, those same faculties currently operate under the influence and conditioning of the defects that have imprisoned them. For example, our physical strength is often enslaved by anger, and anger uses that strength to harm others. Our sexual potency is trapped by lust, and lust uses it to feed carnal desires, leading us deeper and deeper into degeneration. In the same way, every one of our defects subdues and misuses a portion of our essence. This is why we can clearly distinguish the objective from the subjective. The subjective always seeks its own benefit, pursuing the satisfaction of egoic desires. The objective, on the other hand, acts in harmony with the greater good, considering the well-being of others as well. Take laziness, for instance. When we allow ourselves to be carried away by it, laziness is only concerned with doing nothing, procrastinating, seeking entertainment, avoiding effort. It doesn't care if others are working hard or if things would be accomplished faster and more easily with our collaboration. The same happens when we are moved by jealousy, envy, greed, or pride. Each defect only pursues its own particular interest, never the collective good. And here lies the key point. It is impossible to awaken our consciousness as long as it remains bottled up within so many negative states and ways of being. Only through the death of the ego can the trapped essence be released. And the more essence we free, the greater our level of self-awareness becomes. Every time we allow a defect to act through us without practicing the exercise of psychological death, we are feeding our ego. We give it our energy, we make it stronger, and we allow it to tighten its control over us. If we let anger manifest frequently, we become increasingly violent. If we let lust dominate us, we grow more lustful and more perverse. If we allow sadness to take over, we sink deeper and deeper into depression and melancholy. This is why we must remain in constant self-observation and work daily on psychological death to eliminate our defects one by one and gradually rescue the trapped consciousness within us. The other part of our consciousness, the 3% of self-conscious essence that we all possess, is what we call objective consciousness. This 3% came into existence with a very specific purpose: to know oneself. It has no interest whatsoever in whether we own a house, a car, fame, wealth, or any material possessions. Its only concern is to rescue the 97% of our essence that is currently trapped within the ego, and along with it, recover all the wisdom that essence has accumulated during the entire time it has been conditioned. By liberating it, we regain our inner faculties, virtues, powers, and forces, and we can finally manage them consciously. Within every one of us resides this divine spark, this 3% of awakened consciousness, which inherently knows the path to self-realization. It is meant to guide us step by step along the journey of self-knowledge. Unfortunately, in most of us, this 3% is asleep. It has been lulled into inactivity due to our fascination with our personality, our attachment to material things, and our constant entanglement with the endless distractions and temptations that this world offers us. However, things were not always this way. When we were babies, that 3% of consciousness was fully awake. It is precisely this awakened state that gives infants that special glow, that natural beauty, and that unmistakable purity that characterizes them. When babies are born, they come into the world with many innate faculties. They can perceive not only the physical world but also other dimensions. Some newborns can even remember their past lives, and in certain cases, this ability remains with them for a short time. Babies are also naturally telepathic. That is why a newborn can transmit its sensations to the mother, why a mother often instinctively knows whether her baby is crying from hunger, discomfort, or pain. We tend to think this is a special gift that the mother has, but in truth, it is a natural gift of the baby. Young infants also possess the ability to see adults as they truly are. They can perceive people's psychological defects, their hidden intentions, and even their inner corruption. This is why some babies suddenly cry or become unsettled in the presence of certain individuals. They are sensing something others cannot. And because they can still perceive other dimensions, babies can also see their own psychological defects, those that were formed across many past existences. To them, these defects often appear as monstrous figures or ghostly shapes lurking around the crib, seemingly trying to enter their tiny body. But at that stage, the defects cannot take possession yet because the baby has not formed a personality. This is why babies sometimes cry uncontrollably, as if in terror when they sense these entities nearby. Sadly, most parents, unaware of these realities, dismiss such reactions as meaningless night terrors, without understanding their deeper cause. But as the child grows and gradually forms a new personality, the psychological defects begin to enter and take control of the human machine, shaping thoughts, emotions, desires, and actions. Personality is an energetic vehicle that begins to form through imitation during the first years of life, from birth until around the age of 7. A child's personality is shaped by many factors: the country or region where they are born, the customs of their environment, the culture they grow up in, and, above all, what they see others doing. As the personality develops, psychological defects begin to enter little by little, following the electropsychic design that the child brings into this existence. For example, if a child carries within their electropsychic design a tendency toward violence, and they witness their father mistreating their mother, or even mistreating them, they begin to imitate that behavior. As this happens, the defects of anger carried over from past existences gradually begin to surface and take control. Soon, the child starts fighting with siblings and friends, and as they grow older, anger eventually dominates the personality, shaping them into a violent person. On the other hand, if the child's electropsychic design leans toward forming a passive or submissive personality, then in the same situation, they will more likely imitate the submissive attitude of the mother instead of the father's aggression. And so layer by layer, the child develops a complex personality, one that eventually becomes what they believe to be their way of being. However, there is something very important to understand. Personality keeps us fascinated with the endless distractions of the physical world, and this fascination slowly puts to sleep the 3% of consciousness that was originally awake. We become absorbed in school, friends, money, entertainment, relationships, and even sexual indulgence. Without realizing it, we forget our true consciousness, and little by little, that 3% falls into a deeper slumber. Personality also begins to silence that inner force, the quiet but constant call within us that urges us to seek something higher, something deeper, something beyond material existence. It is important to understand that personality is the vehicle through which our psychological defects express themselves. But personality itself is illusory. It is temporary, it belongs to time, and ultimately it dies when the physical body dies. Consciousness, however, never dies. At the moment of physical death, 3 things inevitably come to an end. First, the physical body dies, and in that instant we realize how useless it was to have spent our lives obsessing over material wealth or external appearances. No matter how much fortune we've accumulated or how carefully we've maintained our body, in the end we cannot take any of it with us. Second, the organic vital fund also dies. This is the energetic counterpart of our physical body, the force that sustains life within it. After death, this vital fund gradually disintegrates, like a ghost fading away before the tomb, dissolving along with the physical body. Third, the personality also dies. However, unlike the body, it may take a longer time to fully disintegrate. In some cases, especially when someone was famous, deeply attached to life, or strongly identified with their achievements, the personality can linger like a wandering ghost, temporarily sustained by the emotional energy of those who remember, honor, or mourn the deceased. Eventually, though, even this energetic vehicle dissolves completely, turning into cosmic dust. But it is essential to understand this. None of these 3 aspects, neither the body, nor the vital fund, nor the personality, is our true consciousness. At the moment of death, consciousness, the deepest essence of who we are, continues its journey. It moves to the 5th dimension, where it undergoes the process of judgment that we studied back in Lesson 2, and there it patiently awaits the opportunity to return to a new physical body. However, the ego, our psychological defects, does not die when the physical body dies. Why? Because each defect holds within itself a portion of our immortal essence, and that captured essence gives the ego the ability to transcend physical death. The ego can only be destroyed in one of 2 ways: voluntarily, through the conscious work of psychological death, where we deliberately eliminate our defects one by one, liberating the trapped essence. Involuntarily, through the process of involution, which takes place in the infradimensions once we have exhausted our 108 opportunities to incarnate in human physical bodies without performing this inner work of liberation and awakening. In the infradimensions, the ego is disintegrated mechanically through a slow and painful process that can last thousands of years. Only after this dissolution is the essence released once again, emerging clean, pure, and innocent. However, when the ego is destroyed mechanically, the soul is lost in the process. The freed essence must reconnect to the wheel of samsara to begin a new cycle of evolution and develop an entirely new soul, since the previous one no longer exists. But as long as we have not yet exhausted our 108 opportunities, the law of return ensures that we are sent back into a new physical body. And sadly, when we return to a new incarnation and begin forming a new personality, the ego rejoins us, taking possession of the human machine once again. Everything we've studied so far helps us understand that there are two essential inner works we must accomplish. First, we must awaken the 3% of objective consciousness that is already free within us, the portion of our essence that is not trapped within the ego. Second, we must liberate and awaken the remaining 97% of our subjective consciousness, which is currently conditioned, asleep, and trapped within our psychological defects. Only by performing both works simultaneously can we fully recover our true nature and experience authentic spiritual freedom. So, how can we awaken the 3% of objective consciousness? First, we must begin working with the 3 factors for the revolution of consciousness: dying, being born, and sacrificing ourselves for humanity. We work with psychological death when we make the conscious effort to observe ourselves from moment to moment, to remain awake, to recognize our psychological defects, and to ask our particular Divine Mother for their elimination. As we do this, the dormant power of our consciousness begins to awaken. This is the same inner force capable of freeing us from the ego, and along with it, the ability to judge ourselves objectively also starts to develop. The second factor is the spiritual birth. This work begins when we understand the immense value of sexual energy, when we stop wasting it through masturbation or fornication during sexual activity, and instead, we choose to practice suprasex with a stable partner of the opposite sex. Through this sacred union, sexual energy ascends along the spine, awakening and developing the powers and faculties of our consciousness. The third factor is sacrifice for humanity, sharing this knowledge with our brothers and sisters, helping them find the tools to awaken their own consciousness. When we practice this selfless work, the force of the Father, which is the wisdom hidden within that 3%, begins to awaken within us. Second, we must free ourselves from the fascination in which our personality has trapped us, our endless attachment to the things of this world. We achieve this by working with reflection and psychological death, questioning the concepts and desires that keep us chained to the goals of the personality. These pursuits consume our time, our energy, and our attention, leaving us without the strength or interest to work toward the awakening of our consciousness. Third, we must shift our center of gravity. For now, it revolves almost entirely around the desires and demands of the personality, but step by step we must bring it back to the consciousness. We achieve this by dedicating more and more time to practices that awaken our inner being, such as meditation, astral projection, watching and praying, karma negotiation, suprasex, and even preparing ourselves to teach and transmit this knowledge. And how will we know when our 3% has truly awakened? We will notice it because we will naturally remain in self-observation for most of our day. We will clearly see how the practice of the 3 factors guides us back to our being. We will feel a profound and persistent desire to work on ourselves, and little by little, the things of the world and of the personality will begin to lose their importance, moving quietly into the background. The second great work we must undertake is to release and awaken the 97% of subconsciousness. And we can only achieve this through dying in ourselves, by eliminating each of our psychological defects, our negative ways of being, through the practice of psychological death. We must always remember this key principle. The greater the number of disintegrated egos, the greater the self-awareness. The fewer the disintegrated egos, the lower the percentage of awakened consciousness. This entire work is based on constant self-observation. We must keep our attention directed inward at all times to discover the different defects that manifest in our mind, in our emotions, and in our motor instinctive sexual part. As we observe, we begin to notice how these defects have only one purpose: to pull us away from the present moment, to make us forget ourselves, and to keep us trapped in identification with external circumstances. By doing this, they lead us to waste our energies through all kinds of mechanical reactions. Every time we discover a defect, we must take a second step. Judge it consciously. Understand clearly that the thought, the emotion, the reaction, or the sensation we are experiencing comes from the ego. Recognize that our consciousness is trapped within it, conditioned by that wrong way of being. And by truly understanding how this defect harms us and prevents us from awakening, we prepare ourselves for its elimination. That brings us to the third step, asking for death. We must beg our particular Divine Mother to disintegrate the defect in each of the centers where we observe it manifesting. With every sincere request, we liberate a small portion of the trapped essence. And little by little, our level of consciousness begins to rise, from 3% to 4, 5, 10, 15%, and so on. Through the constant practice of the 3 factors for the revolution of consciousness, we gradually move closer to the goal, the full awakening of 100% of our consciousness, and with it, the attainment of true enlightenment. And with this, we've reached the end of today's topic. I hope this lecture has helped you understand that when we release the subjective consciousness trapped within our psychological defects, we transform it into objective consciousness. If you have any questions about what we discussed today, feel free to leave them in the comments or contact us directly. We'll be happy to help clarify any doubts or concerns you may have about this topic. And now, without further ado, I'd like to invite you to our next lecture, Mechanical Creatures. It's going to be a very interesting session in which we'll discuss the importance of breaking free from our mechanical habits, because as long as we remain robotic beings, acting under the automatic programming of our ego, we will not be able to awaken our consciousness. Until next time, keep working on yourself.